If you have been calling yourself lazy for years, there is a good chance you're not lazy at all. Because laziness is a convenient label that hides a more uncomfortable truth, which is that your brain has learned to avoid discomfort in very specific ways. And it repeats those patterns automatically because they once protected you. Most people do not fail because they lack motivation. They fail because they rely on motivation as if it is a stable fuel source. And then they feel confused when the fuel disappears the moment the task feels boring, uncertain, or emotionally heavy. Consistency is not built by wanting something badly. Consistency is built when your environment, your habits, and your identity point in the same direction. Because when they do not, your mind will choose the shortest path to relief. And that relief usually looks like scrolling, delaying, overeating, overthinking, or starting tomorrow. So in this video, I am going to show you the real reason you cannot stay consistent. And I am going to do it in a way that does not shame you. Because shame creates pressure, and pressure creates avoidance. And avoidance is the cycle you have been trapped in. We are going to break that cycle by understanding what is actually happening inside you. And then by building a system that makes progress easier than relapse. So you stop needing a perfect mood in order to do the work. And you start becoming the kind of person who follows through even when it is inconvenient. The first hidden reason people struggle with consistency is that they confuse resistance with incapability. Because when resistance shows up, they assume it means something is wrong with them. Instead of seeing resistance as the normal signal that you are about to do something that requires growth. Resistance usually appears when the task threatens your comfort, your identity, or your fear of failure. And your brain does not care about your long-term goals as much as it cares about short-term safety. So it sends you thoughts that sound like logic, even though they are often just fear trying to stay in control. This is why you can feel motivated at night and inconsistent in the morning. Because motivation is an emotion. And emotions change depending on energy, stress, and what your environment is pushing into your attention. So the real skill is not eliminating resistance. The real skill is learning to move while resistance is present. Because that is the moment where consistency is actually trained. And that is the moment where most people escape. When you understand this, you stop saying, "I can't." And you start saying, "This is resistance, and I know what to do with it." Because naming the pattern immediately gives you a small amount of power. And small amounts of power repeated daily become self-control. The second hidden reason is that your goals are too vague. Because vague goals create vague days. And vague days create the feeling that nothing is working, even when you are technically trying. When you say, "I want to be disciplined," your mind does not know what action to take. But when you say, "I will work for 20 minutes at 9 a.m. with my phone in another room," your mind can actually execute that. Because it is clear, measurable, and connected to a specific moment. People think consistency is about intensity. But intensity is not the key. Because intense plans often collapse. And collapsing repeatedly teaches your brain that promises do not matter. So the goal is to build a minimum standard. Which means a small daily action you can do even on your worst day. Because the minimum standard protects your identity. And identity is the real engine of consistency. When you keep a small promise daily, you stop feeling like a fraud. Because you build evidence that you are reliable. And reliability creates confidence in a way that motivation never can. The third hidden reason is that your environment is stronger than your willpower. Because willpower is not designed to fight an entire modern world built to distract you. Especially when your phone is within reach and your day is full of noise. If your environment makes the bad habit easy and the good habit hard, you will keep failing and blaming yourself. Even though the real issue is that your setup is working against you. So you stop focusing only on self-control. And you start focusing on friction. Because friction is what decides whether an action happens automatically or not. You increase friction for the habits that ruin you. By removing apps, logging out, putting the phone away, blocking websites. and by making distractions inconvenient enough that you notice the choice. And you decrease friction for the habits that build you. By preparing your workspace, leaving your tools visible, planning your first action, and making the next good step obvious and easy to begin. When the environment supports you, consistency stops feeling like a fight. Because you are no longer trying to win a battle every hour. You are simply following a path that is designed to help you. The fourth hidden reason is that you are trying to change your life with motivation, instead of changing your identity with proof. Because identity is what you believe you are. And you will always return to what you believe you are, even if you have a burst of effort for a few days. If deep down you see yourself as inconsistent, you will interpret one bad day as, "That's just me." And that interpretation becomes permission to quit, even if you were actually doing well before that moment. So you build identity through evidence. And the evidence is created through small promises kept daily. Because every kept promise is a vote for the person you are becoming. This is why the minimum standard matters so much. Because it keeps your streak alive in your mind. And it prevents your brain from telling the story that you always fall off. Over time, you stop trying to become consistent. And you start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. Because you have proof, not hope. And proof is what makes discipline feel natural instead of forced. One of the most important reasons consistency collapses is that people underestimate emotional avoidance. Because a lot of procrastination is not about the task itself. It is about the feeling the task brings up the moment you try to start. Some tasks bring up boredom, some bring up uncertainty, some bring up fear of failing. And some bring up the uncomfortable thought that you might succeed and then be expected to keep succeeding. So your mind looks for relief, and it finds relief in distraction because distraction is fast. This is why you can be capable and still not start. Because capability is not the issue. The issue is that your nervous system associates the task with discomfort. And it has learned a habit of escaping discomfort before it even begins. The solution is not to wait until you feel ready. Because readiness is often an illusion. And waiting usually trains the avoidance even deeper. So you practice beginning with a small, controlled start, where you tell yourself you only need 2 minutes. Not to finish, not to be perfect, but simply to begin. Because beginning is the real victory that breaks the spell. When you begin, the discomfort often drops. Because the mind stops imagining the task and starts doing the task. And imagination is usually heavier than reality. Another reason you cannot stay consistent is that you keep setting goals that are too big for your current life. Because your current life has a certain amount of energy, time, and stress. And when your plan ignores those limits, your plan becomes a fantasy that collapses quickly. People love dramatic changes. Because dramatic changes feel like a new identity. But dramatic changes also demand dramatic discipline. And if your foundation is weak, dramatic discipline becomes burnout. So you start by building a plan that fits your real life. Not the life you imagine when you are inspired at night. Because inspiration is generous with promises that reality has to pay for in the morning. A practical way to do this is to build a floor and a ceiling. Where the floor is the minimum you will do no matter what. And the ceiling is what you do on good days when you have energy. Because this removes the all-or-nothing mindset that ruins consistency. When you have a floor and a ceiling, you stop quitting after a bad day. Because a bad day no longer breaks the plan. It simply shifts you to the floor. And that keeps your identity intact. A hidden reason consistency breaks is that you try to change alone without any structure of accountability. Because when no one sees your promises, it becomes easier to break them quietly. This does not mean you need a crowd. It means you need a system that makes your actions visible. Because visibility creates seriousness, and seriousness creates follow-through. Accountability can be as simple as tracking your habit on paper. Because a visible streak becomes a mirror. And that mirror makes it harder to lie to yourself about what you're doing. It can also be as simple as telling one trusted person your plan. not so they motivate you, but so you feel the natural pressure of being someone whose word means something. The point is not shame. The point is structure. Because structure is what replaces motivation. And when structure is present, your mood stops being the deciding factor. When you make your actions visible, you start respecting your own word. Because your word is no longer a private wish. It becomes a commitment that has weight. Another reason you struggle is that you keep rewarding yourself in ways that sabotage you. Because your brain learns through reward. And if the reward after effort is always a distraction that drains you, your system becomes confused and your energy becomes unstable. For example, if you work for a short time and then reward yourself with endless scrolling, you might feel relief. But you also train your brain to associate effort with needing an escape, which makes the next effort feel heavier before you even start. So you build rewards that restore you instead of draining you. Like a short walk, a shower, a meal that makes you feel good, a conversation that energizes you, or a clean break that has a clear ending. The goal is to teach your brain that effort leads to strength, not to collapse. Because when effort leads to collapse, you start resisting effort. And then you call it laziness even though it is simply learned exhaustion. When you choose better rewards, consistency becomes easier. Because your brain starts trusting that work will not punish it. And that trust reduces resistance over time. A final reason consistency fails is that people do not plan for failure. Because they assume they will stay strong. And then they feel shocked when they have a bad day and everything falls apart. Real consistency is not perfection. Real consistency is recovery. Because recovery is what keeps you moving forward when life gets messy. So you build a recovery plan in advance, where you decide what you will do when your energy is low, when your mood is bad, or when your schedule breaks. Because those moments are predictable even if the exact day is not. A recovery plan might mean you do the minimum standard. You clean one small area. You do 10 minutes of work. Or you take a walk and then return. Because recovery is about staying connected to your identity, not about winning the day. When you learn recovery, you stop fearing bad days. Because bad days no longer erase your progress. They simply become part of the process. And that mindset is what turns a person from inconsistent to unstoppable. Look closely at the first hour of your day, because it usually tells the whole story. Since a person who begins the morning in reaction mode will spend the rest of the day trying to catch up. And catching up feels like effort but often produces very little progress. When the day starts with instant input, like messages, notifications, and endless information, your mind gets pulled into other people's priorities before you choose your own. And then you wonder why your focus feels weak, even though your focus was never protected long enough to become strong. A simple shift is to create a small protected start, where you do one deliberate action before you let the world touch you. Like drinking water, taking 5 slow breaths, writing your top priority, or moving your body for a few minutes. This sounds small, but it changes the tone of the entire day. Because it teaches your nervous system that you lead first and react second. And that single lesson is what consistency is made of. When you begin this way consistently, you stop depending on willpower later. Because you have already built momentum early. And momentum makes the rest of the day less negotiable. Most people who feel inconsistent are not missing discipline, they are drowning in options. Because when you try to improve everything at once, your mind becomes crowded, your plan becomes heavy. And heavy plans are the first thing you abandon when life gets stressful. A crowded plan creates a crowded mind. And a crowded mind looks for relief. Which is why distraction becomes so attractive in the middle of the day. Even though distraction is the exact thing making your life feel chaotic. So you choose one priority for a season. Not because you are limiting yourself, but because real progress needs a clear direction. And direction disappears the moment you spread yourself across 10 goals. The practical move is to select one daily non-negotiable. Then schedule it at a specific time. And treat it like an appointment you cannot cancel. Because appointments get done and vague intentions get postponed. When you do this, consistency becomes lighter. Because you stop carrying a mental checklist all day. And you start carrying one clear mission that your mind can actually execute. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never admit. Which is that sometimes inconsistency is not laziness, it is fear wearing normal clothes. Because committing seriously forces you to face the risk of failing. And the mind would rather delay than be tested. Delay keeps your self-image safe. Because as long as you are about to start, you can still believe you would succeed. And that belief feels comforting even if it is slowly costing you your life. This is why people can be talented and still stay stuck. Because talent is not the missing ingredient. The missing ingredient is the willingness to be seen trying. And the willingness to survive the embarrassment of being a beginner again. The way out is to commit in small measurable ways. Like setting a deadline, choosing a daily action, and making it visible. Because visibility turns wishes into commitments. And commitments force your brain to stop living in fantasy. When you learn to commit like this, you stop being a someday person. Because you begin building something real. And real things have structure, deadlines, and standards that keep you moving. If you quit often, it might not be because you cannot do hard things. It might be because you cannot tolerate boring things. Because real progress is usually repetitive. And repetition does not give you the emotional reward that novelty gives. In the beginning, new plans feel exciting. Because excitement makes you feel like a new person. But excitement fades, and then the work becomes ordinary. And ordinary work is where real transformation happens. So the real training is boredom tolerance. Which means you practice doing the same small action even when you feel nothing. Because that is the moment where your brain learns discipline. And that is the moment where most people go searching for a new routine instead. A simple method is to repeat one habit at the same time each day. With the same starting ritual. Because rituals reduce decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is one of the biggest reasons people stop showing up. When you can stay steady through ordinary days, you stop being dependent on inspiration. Because you become someone who follows a system. And systems keep working even when emotions disappear. There is a version of inconsistency that looks like laziness from the outside. But inside it is simply a person carrying too much mental weight. Because guilt, self-criticism, and pressure can drain energy faster than work ever will. When you miss one day and attack yourself, you create emotional pain. And then your mind looks for relief from that pain. So it escapes into distraction, numbness, or avoidance. And that escape reinforces the exact pattern you hate. The fix is to replace self-punishment with honest evaluation. Because evaluation creates learning, while punishment creates fear. And fear makes your brain avoid the very habits you're trying to build. So instead of saying, "I'm lazy," you ask, "What broke my system today?" And then you adjust the plan so it fits your real life. Because consistent people are not perfect. They are simply good at restarting quickly without turning it into a drama. When you learn to restart without shame, you become consistent without needing to be harsh. Because you stop fighting yourself. And you start training yourself like someone you are responsible for improving. If you keep calling yourself lazy, you might be using the wrong word, because most laziness is really your brain avoiding discomfort in the fastest way it knows, and it does that automatically when the task feels uncertain, boring, or emotionally heavy. So the goal is not to wait until you feel motivated, because motivation changes with sleep, stress, and mood, and a life built on mood will always feel unstable. Instead, you train a small start that bypasses debate, because debate is where progress dies quietly, and the simplest rule is that you begin for 2 minutes, not to finish and not to be perfect, but to break the spell of hesitation. Once you start, the mind often calms down, because imagination is usually heavier than reality, and that small win teaches your nervous system that discomfort is survivable, which is where real consistency begins. A lot of inconsistency is not about discipline, it is about vague goals, because vague goals create vague days, and vague days make you feel like nothing is working even when you are trying. So you turn the goal into a specific action attached to a time and place, like working for 20 minutes at a set hour with your phone in another room, because your brain can execute clarity far better than it can execute vague intention. Then you build a minimum standard that you keep even on bad days, because repeated collapse teaches your brain that promises do not matter, while small promises kept daily create proof that you are reliable. When you become reliable to yourself, consistency stops feeling like a personality trait and starts feeling like a system that finally fits your real life. If your environment makes distraction easy and progress hard, you will keep failing and blaming yourself, even though the setup is what is beating you. So you use friction, which means you make the bad habit inconvenient by removing apps, logging out, putting the phone away, and blocking the easy escapes, while you make the good habit obvious by preparing your workspace and choosing the first tiny action in advance. This matters because willpower is not meant to fight a world designed to steal attention, and when the environment supports you, discipline stops being a constant fight. You are not weak, you are simply trying to win with the wrong battlefield, so change the battlefield and the results will change. Sometimes what looks like laziness is emotional avoidance, because the task is not hard, but the feeling that comes with the task is hard, and your brain escapes the feeling through procrastination. So you pause and ask what you are avoiding, because the answer is usually stress, insecurity, uncertainty, or fear of failing, and naming it gives you choice instead of automatic reaction. Then you build a pressure plan for stressful moments, because pressure will come again, and if you do not decide ahead of time, you will default to the fastest comfort you trained, like scrolling or quitting. A pressure plan can be simple, like a short walk, breathing, a shower, or a 10-minute focus block, because restorative comfort protects consistency while draining comfort destroys it. Real consistency is not perfection, it is recovery, because the people who win are not the people who never slip, they are the people who restart quickly without turning it into a drama. So you build a floor and a ceiling, where the floor is what you do on bad days and the ceiling is what you do on good days, because this removes the all-or-nothing mindset that keeps restarting your life every week. You measure process instead of only outcomes, because outcomes take time, while process proves you're becoming reliable right now, and reliability is how self-trust returns. And when self-trust returns, you stop calling yourself lazy, because you finally see the truth, which is that you did not need more motivation, you needed a system that makes follow-through possible.